Hey y'all, welcome to the Southern Appalachian Herbal Podcast. I'm Judson Carroll and I'm an herbalist. I'm also a wild crafter, a gardener, and herb grower. I'm coming to you from high atop the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, just a stone's throw from the Tennessee line, overlooking the Pisgah National Forest. Absolutely surrounded by the bounty of God's green earth. I spent most of my life wandering these mountains and learning about plants from the old timers and all sorts of characters. On this show, we'll talk about herbs and how to use them, how to find them, how to grow them, how to make preparations. We'll talk about a lot of things. We can also talk about permaculture, homesteading, foraging, and living off the land. Most anything, really. You can email me at southernappalachianherbs@gmail.com if you have a question or a comment. You can also contact me through the Grow Network, where I'm a regular contributor and a moderator for the forums. And my blog is, of course, southernappalachianherbs@blogspot.com. All right, y'all. I'm going to sit my guitar down and let's talk about herbs. Hey, y'all. Welcome to this week's show. Today, we're going to continue discussing how to identify medicinal herbs in the wild by their plant families. But first of all, I want to tell you about an interesting conversation I had recently. I was down at a tire shop having some work done, and the fellow next to me was a Chinese dry cleaner, and we started chatting. He was an interesting guy. I had a book with me on herbs, so eventually the subject turned to herbs. He asked what I was reading, and told him I was an herbalist, and he started telling me about growing up in China and asking if I was familiar with Chinese herbs. And I studied Chinese traditional medicine for about a decade or so. And we had a really interesting conversation because he started discussing all the medicinal soups his grandmother used to serve him. And that's something that really fascinates me, the Chinese medicinal soups. Well, anyway, we're sitting there, and suddenly the guy just like shouts out, "Hey, I know that Popo." I'm like, what? It's an odd statement, you have to admit. Well, he jumps up and runs out, comes back in with a local police officer and introduces him to me. Well, this guy, interesting fellow. And he may be listening to the show right now, so I'm just going to give you a shout out if you are. I'm not going to say your name on air here. Veteran, combat veteran, police officer for I don't even know how many years. I mean, so many injuries, so many tangles, I guess you'd say, so many fights with crackheads and meth heads and just people up to no good. But the guy was really interested in herbs. He's big into primitive skills, spent a lot of time with various Native American tribes, learning their traditional ways, big into martial arts, big into, a lot of stuff that we talk about on this show. So we literally stood there and talked for at least 2 hours about all kinds of medicinal plants. I mean, it was a great conversation. Toward the end, though, he said, the one thing I'm really concerned about if the bleep hits the fan, so to speak, is what would I do about high blood pressure? Well, this guy is in a really high stress job, and that is a super legitimate concern. And it made me think afterwards, we need to think about what are our main health concerns and how would we address those if we couldn't go to a drugstore, if we couldn't get a prescription from a doctor, if we had to deal with it ourselves. It's really important to go ahead and look at these things beforehand and find out what herbs are useful. Make sure you're growing them or make sure you've stocked up on them in dry form or tinctures and be able to identify them in the wild. So I gave him a list of herbs for high blood pressure. I'll just run through those real quick. And we discussed, the various side effects because in his line of work, which is exceedingly dangerous, I don't know if you know much about crime in eastern North Carolina. Yeah, it's pretty bad. Very often, certain areas of North Carolina on the interstates have a higher murder rate per capita and higher crime rate per capita than comparable to places like Chicago. I mean, honestly, it can be very bad. And he can't have blood pressure medicine that's going to dull his awareness or slow down his reflexes. That could cost him his life. So we went through these and discussed which ones you'd want to use at certain times. Which ones not to take on the job, which ones to think about using before bed, which ones could be taken long term or would just be used short term. And I gave him some, oh, I don't know, 7 or 8 suggestions. I mean, obviously valerian. Valerian has been used for centuries for high blood pressure. Once you get used to valerian, it doesn't make you as sleepy as it does at first. Valerian is an interesting herb, though, in that different people react to it different ways. Some people, it will induce sleep. And I think for anybody, if you take enough of it, it's going to induce sleep. But for maybe 20%, 10 to 20% of the population, people who take it, it can cause really vivid, disturbing dreams. May not be the best idea. Long term, it can actually cause irritability. So that's really something, especially a cop needs to think about, right? Also, valerian is good for pain, but it's antispasmodic, but it's more for when you really can't get to sleep because of the pain and you take enough valerian to knock you out. So maybe a better option would be skullcap. Now, skullcap is antispasmodic. Skullcap is relaxing and lowers stress. For most people, it doesn't make them as sleepy or dull the senses as valerian. For some people, it does. So that's another one you have to experiment with beforehand. Hopsbud. Hopsbud is a great herb for lowering blood pressure. It's a great sedative herb. It can make people sleepy. Passion flower, I think, would probably be the best of those options, for like daytime use. But again, it depends entirely on the individual. Passion flower has a strong sedative effect on some people. For me, it has like almost none. I would imagine this guy I was talking to, I mean, he's a martial artist. He can get, amped up and stay in that mindset. Probably more like me. I also have a background in martial arts. Passion flower probably wouldn't affect him strongly, but you never know. I mean, he and I are about the same size and height and, build. I would recommend that anyone in that situation use these herbs beforehand when they've got a couple of days off so they know how they react to them. One that would be a very good option, I thought, for him was bugleweed. We discussed bugle before. It's in the mint family. It literally grows wild all over the place in the area where I met him. In the springtime, you harvest the flower spikes. Bugle lowers blood pressure through a cardiotonic effect. It actually slows and strengthens heart rate. You have to take a whole lot of bugle to get sleepy. To me, I have had no bad experiences with it whatsoever. Now, Plants for a Future says that it could have potential side effects in some people. I think this is a great herb and one that, if everything fell apart, he would still be able to find every spring, stock up on it, go out and pick a few hundred flower spikes and dry them and make the tincture to have it and, work with the dosage. Personally speaking, because it grows wild here and because it works well for me, that would have been the one I recommended. But of course, I'm giving the warnings and the virtues of each of these herbs, and people have to research and figure them out for themselves. Probably the very best herb, though, that could be grown, actually is not too hard to grow, could be stocked up on, but it's not native to this area, is ashwagandha or withania, withania somnifera, as it's known in Western herbalism. Ashwagandha is the Ayurvedic name. This is an adaptogen that also is slightly sedative. Now, withania somnifera means it can induce sleep, but it doesn't seem to for me. It doesn't seem to for anybody I've ever spoken with. I think you would have to take a whole lot. But because it's an adaptogen, it's not only going to be, slightly relaxing, it's not only going to be good for blood pressure, which are two of the virtues of this plant, but the adaptogen helps the body deal with stress. It has an effect on the glandular system of the body so that the blood pressure wouldn't be elevated in the first place, or at least not as much. And ashwagandha can be taken daily, long term, no problem. I think that is probably the best, long term use daily with, if it works for the individual, bugleweed being a great secondary herb. And, keeping like the valerian and the skullcap for at night before bed, or when you really are in a high stress situation where things just won't settle down, even when you're off the job and relaxing. And another one that would fall into that category, which is really one of my favorite herbs, is kava kava. Kava kava is a Polynesian plant. It does not grow here. I imagine if you could get some rootstock, I guess it would have to be maybe seeds. I think you have to grow it from rootstock. You could grow it in a greenhouse. There are various varieties of kava kava. They're so-called noble varieties. Those are the ones you want to look for. Kava kava is strongly sedative, strongly relaxing. Um, you can even make a beer from it. Bill Mollison, the father of permaculture, had a lot of experience with kava kava in the Polynesian islands, and he talked about how, like Friday night, Saturday in America, where people go to the bars and drink a lot of alcohol to unwind. The people in those areas would go and drink a lot of kava kava to unwind. And at first they get talkative, just like you would if you're drinking alcohol. And then they get slowly more mellow and more mellow and more mellow. And these kava kava actually has a strong muscle relaxing effect, so that some of them would drink so much that they had to be carried home. They could not, walk, talk, or stand. Again, that's abusing an herb. It's not using it the right way. But kava kava can be strongly sedative, strongly relaxing, strongly lowering the blood pressure. And what's nice about it is the dosage, very individual to the person, but it's very predictable. Like the first time you take kava kava, first thing you'll notice is your mouth and your throat go numb. Great for sore throats and such, coughs and any spasmodic condition of the throat because of that. First time you take it, it's probably going to have a good, strong sedative effect. Then you kind of get used to it and you start finding your dosage. It's been used for thousands of years. And even though there was a little scare that the medical industry, the pharmaceutical industry, once again, put out probably in the 90s, maybe early 2000s, that kava could damage the liver. In the areas where it's been used traditionally and used frequently and used heavily, there is no evidence that it's ever damaged anyone's liver. Meanwhile, they hand out Tylenol like candy, and Tylenol will destroy your liver. So those are good blood pressure lowering herbs. But the point is anticipating the need ahead of time. What is your main health concern? Well, for me, it's allergic asthma. I have had asthma since I was about 3 years old. It flares up for certain allergens, and I have to have what I need on hand beforehand because, asthma can be deadly if you don't treat it correctly. For you, it's probably something else, individualistic for you. And have those herbs on hand, know where to source them, know how to grow them, know how to find them in the woods. Sometimes, honestly, you cannot predict anything. I mean, I've had COVID back in. Oh, this is a great example. I guess it was around '09. We had a second go around of the swine flu. If you know your medical history, the swine flu was so much worse than COVID. When it came around at the end of World War One, it killed like 50 million people, and people would get sick and die within 24 hours, and it just spread like wildfire. It killed far more people than World War One actually killed. It's a very different flu than COVID, and there's absolutely no way I could have prepared for this flu. No way. Let me tell you how this worked. I get up one morning and get in my vehicle and start driving. I think, oh, my brakes feel spongy. What's going on? My brake line had been cut. I don't know how, but my brake line was cut. And fortunately, I was kind of able to coast into a brake shop that was just down the road. And I had just enough fluid and pressure in that brake line that I didn't lose control of my vehicle before I got there. I go in, I speak to the fella, I'm feeling fine. He starts working on my vehicle. Maybe 30 minutes later, I'm thinking, wow, I really don't feel good. I feel a little out of it. I'm not, responding correctly. I'm feeling fever and flushed. I get the car. I had I think I maybe had to go by the bank or pick up something from the grocery store. I don't remember exactly the details. By the time I got home, and I mean, this is within about an hour window, I went from feeling fine to running one of the highest fevers I've ever had, throwing up violently, basically passing out, um, mind just muddled, could not think, could not do anything, horrible chills, horrible aches and pains all over my body. All I could do was just get in bed and hope I didn't die. And about 2 hours later, I woke up just intensely sick, worst I've ever felt, and suddenly blood just started gushing out of my nose. And 15 minutes later, I felt better. That's how fast the swine flu works. In, this is around 1920 or so when the epidemic started with the bad swine flu. Spanish flu is what they called it. People died of that hemorrhage. This flu, as opposed to, say, COVID or your regular seasonal flu, which usually kills you through pneumonia, gets into the lungs and it makes those cells swell and begin to rupture. The fluid starts building up in your lungs. The swine flus, they cause blood cells to explode, basically to rupture as the virus replicates. At that moment, when the blood is just gushing from whatever orifice it finds its way out, your fever spikes, the virus is replicating. That's when you're most contagious, and most people actually bled to death, which brings up an interesting point. Not only can you not prepare for something like that, and once you've gone through it once, your immune system is so much stronger, and you'll probably never catch another one of those particular types of flu again. There are types A, B, and C flus. There are DNA and RNA flu viruses. Once you've had that, you're probably immune from catching a Spanish style or, I mean, a swine style flu again. But you do have a little natural immunity and protection, and there is no vaccine for that. And that's one of the reasons that the COVID vaccine is having so many issues because it's an RNA virus. RNA viruses mutate very easily. There are a lot of things we cannot prepare for at all. But interestingly, there's something going around the internet, and I haven't been able to verify it, but apparently Dr. Fauci did a big study years ago on that swine flu, that Spanish flu epidemic. And he said that most people didn't die from the hemorrhages, which is what I had always read. He said most people did actually die from pneumonia, but the pneumonia was actually caused, the infectious pneumonia was caused by wearing masks. So, hey, it's a world of mystery, especially when it comes to Dr. Fauci. You might want to look that up and research it. Like I said, I just saw it this morning. I haven't been able to research it yet to verify one way or the other. And everything I've read on the subject said that people died of hemorrhage. So could be a complete fallacy. I just thought it was interesting. It's just a little aside. So let's get into these plant families. Let's start with the dandelion subfamily of the asters. All right. You all know dandelions, the hated weed that is probably one of the most useful herbs known to man. Mr. Elpel, in his book Botany in a Day, describes dandelion. He says the dandelion subfamily is the most distinct subgroup of the aster family. The distinguishing feature is the strap-shaped petals, the petals being strap-shaped. That means they are long and rectangular. Ray flowers have mostly parallel edges like straps instead of tapered edges like petals of other flowers. Also, these ray flowers often overlap all the way to the center of the flower like a dandelion. There are no disc flowers like you would find in a sunflower. Another pattern of the subfamily is the milky juice in the stems. Most, if not all, members of the dandelion subfamily are edible, but bitter due to the milky juice. The bitterness makes these plants valuable as a digestive aid. Dandelion leaves, especially, are known as a spring tonic, used to cleanse the liver after a long winter of eating hard to digest foods. Please note that many unrelated plants have milky juice and some are poisonous. Check the flower to make sure it is a member of the dandelion subfamily before you eat it. All right, now you've probably seen false dandelion. False dandelion is known as agoceras. Leaves are edible, and apparently the milky juice can be hardened and chewed like gum. So don't worry if you pick false dandelion and mistake it for dandelion. It's edible as well. Then there's chicory, wonderful chicory. The leaves are edible as a salad green or pot herb, especially after blanching to reduce bitterness. The bitterness is a useful digestive aid and a liver stimulant. The young roots are edible raw or cooked. They contain up to 58% inulin, polysaccharides, which are favorable for diabetics. Chicory is similar, but more mild than dandelion. The roots can be gently roasted and ground as a coffee substitute, which, as I've said before, I think is questionable. I mean, I love community coffee. That's probably my favorite brand of coffee all time. And that is a very dark French roast type of coffee made down in New Orleans, blended with a nice mild roasted chicory. Many other chicory coffees, Louisiana, for instance, are too bitter for my taste, and I like bitter coffee. The community coffee has a mild sweetness to it that comes from the chicory as well. It's really brought out. Well, if you have it as dessert coffee, you put some milk in there and a little shot of bourbon or something or brandy, it'll bring out this amazing, rich, sweet flavor to that coffee that only comes from that combination of coffee and chicory. But chicory by itself just really does not appeal to me as a coffee substitute. But if you don't think of it as a coffee substitute, you think of it as a coffee addition, and you do it the right way, hey, it's good stuff. Really good stuff, actually. There's actually a commercially available coffee substitute made of chicory roots called Cathix. I have never tried that, but this is where the sweetness comes from. Roasting the roots converts the inulin into oxymethylfurfural, a compound with a coffee-like aroma and a little bit of sweetness. All right, there is hawksbeard. Hawksbeard is crepus. It's an edible. It's one of your edible pot herbs, the leaves, look for it in the spring. There's hawkweed. Now, hawkweed, which is Hieracium, also called mousy or hawkweed. Tea of the plant is astringent and diuretic and used in the usual ways. Well, Father Kunzel, in his book, Herbs and Weeds, he found good use for hawkweed, mousy or hawkweed. Let's see what he has to say on that subject. Father Kunzel said, people who are very weak because of severe blood loss, who are feverish and shivering, will recover very quickly if they often get a raw egg sprayed with hawkweed powder. I guess we always say dusted with hawkweed powder. Dosed with hawkweed powder, that's probably a better word. Remember, this is translated from German. It grows on stony soil in the Alps. The flower resembles a dandelion in color and shape, only is thinner and has longer leafless stem and a bitter taste. Cattle like to eat them and they give them a lot of milk. There are many different kinds of this herb, even reddish ones. All have the same healing power. Hawkweed is also excellent for edema and for all urine buildup. This wonderful plant will be as effective when boiled in wine, soup, or milk. The next one we come to is the wild lettuce, specifically wild lettuce, prickly lettuce. Let's see what Mr. Elpel says. He says domestic leaf lettuce belongs to this genus. Note that prickly lettuce has a row of prickles down the mid-rib underneath the leaf. Sow thistle or Saunchus does not. The thistles are also in the aster family, and in various stages of growth, they can be a little hard to tell apart. Prickly lettuce is edible as a salad green or a pot herb. The leaves are extremely bitter in taste. Now, this is the interesting part. Prickly lettuce is sometimes called lettuce opium because the sap is reminiscent of the milky white latex from the opium poppy. The sap does have a very mild analgesic effect and is safe enough even for children. It includes two bitter principles, lactucin and lactocopicirin, which were shown to have a depressant effect on the nervous system of small animals. However, the bitter principles are very unstable, so any commercial preparations are functionally useless, according to Tyler. Now, Tyler is the one who wrote Tyler's Herbs of Choice. And to put it mildly, that is my least favorite herbal book ever written. Some people like it. It was written by it was written by a person who seemed more to say, all these herbs, 99% of them don't work because I can't prove it in a laboratory. Well, a lot of what he wrote was just plain wrong. For instance, Boneset, Boneset, Eupator. In his book, if I remember correctly, and I'm just quoting from memory, he said it was worthless, had no effect whatsoever. Well, later studies have proven it to be a very valuable herb, exactly for what herbalists have used it for couple hundred years at least. It helps break a fever. It is febrifuge. It also has some antiviral and antibiotic properties. It is an excellent herb to use for, say, flu epidemics, which was where boneset came into regular use in early America. There was very bad flu, an epidemic. Who knows which flu it was? It could have been, like our COVID virus today. It could have been like the Spanish flu. It could have been an avian flu. It was decimating the colonies in early America and the states, after America became a nation. And the Native Americans showed the settlers, hey, here's a great herb which helps reduces fever and helps you fight off this awful cold. They called it bone break fever. And I'm telling you, after having both the severe symptoms of that swine flu and having had the COVID, your bones feel like they're going to break. The fever is so intense. And boneset is an herb that helps with that. Well, according to Tyler, it was useless. So that and probably 100 other things I can point to in his book, I think his book is useless. That's my opinion. Some people like it. It's up to you. Make your own decision. But as far as the wild lettuce, tinctured wild lettuce works really well for some people. It can be made into a commercial preparation. It doesn't have to be the sap smoked as one would opium or whatever. But the only thing about it, and this may be why Tyler couldn't prove it in his laboratories, wild lettuce only has that sedative pain relieving effect in about 50% of the population. I find wild lettuce to be useless to me. Miss Marjorie Wildcraft of the Grow Network is a big proponent of wild lettuce for pain relief. It works well for her. People are different. Herbs are different for different people. And that's why people like Tyler have such a hard time proving things in laboratories. It doesn't mean it doesn't work. It means people are different. And what works for you may not work for me and vice versa. Uh, Oddly enough, the father of medicine, Hippocrates, knew that quite well. His first book on medicine discussed how people from different ethnic backgrounds, people that lived in different regions would have different health concerns and would react differently to medications and treatments. Somehow, when we got down to the scientific method of everything having to be stay under a microscope, we decided that all people were alike and that all medications acted the same way on all people. And anybody with any common sense will tell you that it's absolutely not true. Okay, a Native American is going to have more trouble with insulin resistance. An African is going to have more trouble with cell anemia. Uh, you can go down the list, and one of Irish heritage like me is going to fry in the bright sunshine and have problems with sun that someone with a darker complexion is not going to have. So an Asian, especially a Japanese person, is likely going to be lactose intolerant. People are very different due to their genetic makeup, and modern medicine seems to have forgotten this. Even though, speaking again of COVID, I was recently listening to a medical researcher, a virologist, who made, what we may consider to be a very surprising statement. Her name is Sherry Markson. She's Australian. Doctor, again, scientist. She says viruses target ethnic groups differently. Viruses target ethnic groups. Think of that. Their mutations, their way of adapting to their environment, they're smart enough to adapt to certain ethnic groups, and yet our doctors are not smart enough to realize that. Well, Sherry Markson again, she was quoted in a newspaper, I think it was called The Australian, and you can look that up. Viruses target ethnic groups. Fascinating, isn't it? The more we know, the less we know, it seems. So let's move on to lapsin. The plant is minimally edible as a salad green or a pot herb. We don't know of any herbal uses for that. Skeleton weed, Lygodesmia. A tea of the plant is used to increase lactose production, suggesting the presence of stimulating resins. Rattlesnake root. Many plants are called rattlesnake root or rattlesnake master or rattlesnake this or that. When the early settlers came to America, there were a lot of rattlesnakes There are no snakes. There are no poisonous snakes in Ireland, for instance, and I don't believe there are any in Scotland. I honestly don't know of any in England, come to think of it. But when the settlers came here, well, St. Patrick hadn't gone before them and driven all the snakes out, right? So there were a whole lot of rattlesnakes, and the Native Americans would recommend various herbs to the white settlers, and every one of them that treated a rattlesnake bite or a copperhead bite or whatever was called snake medicine. So this particular rattlesnake root is Prenanthes. A tea of the root is both astringent and bitter and used for diarrhea. More than likely, the astringency of that herb helped with the swelling and tissue damage from the rattlesnake bite. Saunchus, which is sow thistle, as I said, thistles are very closely related. They're both in the same family. Is edible as a salad green or a pot herb. The stem has a milky latex type sap, and I've done a whole show on the thistles, so they're great plants for eating and for medicine. Be sure to check that out if you haven't heard of it before. And now we get to dandelion specifically. Dandelions are one of the most nutritious plants on earth. Yet every year people senselessly spend millions of dollars on chemicals trying to kill them. Then they buy lifeless, nutritionless lettuce for the table. Dandelion leaves and roots are rich in vitamins A, B, C, and E, and the minerals iron, phosphorus, potassium, and calcium. Dandelions are bitter, useful as a digestive aid. Most people think that the greens are too bitter to eat at first, but just try a small amount mixed in with other greens. You can develop a taste for them until they hardly seem bitter at all. And that's true. I remember when I first ate dandelion greens, I thought they were terribly bitter. And now, if I'm out walking, I just pick them fresh and eat them. When they're grown in the shade, they tend to be larger and sweeter. They also tend to be sweeter before they flower. Most greens, call it bolting when they flower, and then they turn very bitter. He says, I keep a simple digging tool in a handy spot to harvest dandelions root and all. Most of the time I put the greens on an egg sandwich for breakfast. The roots I clean and dry. When I save up enough roots, I roast them and grind them for a delicious coffee substitute. Again, I've never been impressed by that. A lot of people like dandelion root tea, and I don't mind it as a tea, just dried, unroasted. And, if I wasn't trying to substitute it for coffee, I might find it pretty good as a breakfast beverage just for enjoyment. But no, to me, it's no coffee substitute, but that's just for my taste. He says, I also pay my kids 5 cents for each dandelion root they dig up, cut, and wash for me. Roasting dandelion roots sweetens them by breaking the inulin polysaccharides down into fructose. The roasted powdered roots make a delicious coffee substitute, much like chicory roots. Medicinally, dandelion roots and leaves are most bitter in the spring, useful as a diuretic and stimulating to the liver, spleen, and kidneys, which is interesting because I find them less bitter in the spring. But who knows? Mr. Elpel's in Colorado and I'm in the Appalachian Mountains. Maybe they just grow a little sweeter at one time of the year than another for us. The plant is safe for long-term use, making it ideal for dissolving calcium stones. Dandelions, especially the roots, are high in sodium, which is recommended for breaking down acid in the blood. Dandelions may lower blood sugar and are an aid for diabetics. The latex sap for the stem is used on warts. Dandelions are also a wonderful liver herb. They are very good for reducing liver inflammation and stimulating the digestion. They have antiviral properties, especially for bladder infections and urinary tract infections. Dandelions are just one of the most wonderful herbs we have. They're not native to this country. They were brought here by our ancestors for food and medicine. And we've forgotten that, or at least some people have. Most people have that spend money on Roundup and such to try to get rid of their dandelions at the risk of giving themselves cancer, apparently, or Parkinson's disease, or whatever they're in court for these days. And lastly, this is one of the most interesting in the family. We have salsify, or goat's beard, oyster plant. This is such a cool plant. This is another one that was widely grown by our ancestors as a vegetable. The root is what you're really looking for in salsify. It tastes slightly of oyster. It's a vegetable that tastes sort of like a parsnip and, yeah, sort of like oysters. And it's such an interesting plant. A lot of these old vegetables, such as parsnip, rutabaga, celeriac, the roots of celery, were very common on tables before the consolidation of food marketers and manufacturers and the factory farms, our ancestors had much more variety in their diet. And I could prove with cookbooks from, say, anywhere up to 1950, from the 1940s going back to the 1700s. I have cookbooks. Our ancestors, frankly, ate better than we do now. They had more variety, they had better flavors, and healthier, more tasty food. Most Americans don't even eat 10 vegetables in a year. I mean, 10 different types of vegetables. Most eat around five. And as far as fruits, most people don't eat anything more than, say, apples, bananas, citrus. A lot of people don't even eat strawberries and pears and plums and all that wonderful stuff. Maybe a few blueberries every now and then. Our ancestors ate it all. I mean, our ancestors actually had more varieties in the store. I've got the culinary encyclopedia from, I think it's like 1942, 1945, and they list over 100 apples that one could see in the store, and they gave uses for which variety of apple was better for eating out of hand, for making into applesauce, for using in pies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. 100 varieties. And now you go into the store, you have old Granny Smith, Golden Delicious, Fuji maybe, Red Delicious, maybe Pink Lady. That's it. We have, in our quest for modernity and convenience, we have deprived ourselves of the incredible bounty of the earth, all those wonderful flavors. I mean, yeah, we have more ethnic foods these days, and that's wonderful. I mean, I can eat at Asian restaurants and South American restaurants, and I can eat foods from all over the world. But the very variety that gave our ancestors health, that caused my great grandparents all to live to be about 100 years old, and to be strong and not have to go to doctors really until the very end of their lives. I mean, 90-year-old men out there working hard on the farm, and harder than most people do today, strong, hale, hardy, healthy people. They had got that nutrition from that wide variety of food, and having eaten at the tables of my great grandmother and my grandmother and that variety of food, I can tell you they ate a whole lot better than most people do today. That was good food, really good food. So, other properties of salsify. He says salsify produces edible, slightly bitter foliage and large edible roots. It is sometimes planted as a garden vegetable. It really should be in your garden. Trust me. If you like interesting flavors, you'll like this plant. It is biennial, producing an edible root the first year, which turns woody in the second year. The purple flowered species are best. The yellow flowered species are more fibrous and bitter. I once dug up a field mouse's cellar with nearly 2 gallons of salsify and grass roots. Wow. Additionally, salsify is used as a diuretic and digestive stimulant. So that covers the dandelion subgroup of the aster family. It's one that doesn't have a whole lot of risk associated with it. For the most part, plants that look like dandelion are edible and safe and medicinal all at the same time. But you can order dandelion and chicory seeds from a good organic seed company, heirloom seed companies. And those dandelions, will usually be Italian dandelions or French dandelions or chicory or whatever. They've actually been handed down for generations as heirloom seeds for their oftentimes less bitter, more deliciously edible qualities. So, you know, I like to eat them in the wild. You might want to grow them in the garden. And if you do grow them in the garden, you'll get used to finding out which time of the year they taste better and not. So, anyway, y'all, have a great week. Remember to prepare for your common ailments, no matter what they may be. If you have any questions, send me an email. I can try to send you some suggestions or point you in the right direction. And I will see you again next week. Have a good one. The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, do your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.